My granddaughter pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand when she hugged me goodbye on Sunday. She held on a second longer than usual, and when she pulled back, she wouldn't look at me. Just turned and walked to the car where her stepfather was waiting. I didn't open it until I got inside. "Grandpa, check the shed behind Mom's old house, the one on Clearwater Road that Victor says is being cleaned out. Go before Thursday. Please don't tell him I told you. Please." Her handwriting was small and cramped, like she'd been trying to make the words take up less space, like she was scared even the paper might give her away. I stood in my kitchen for a long time reading it over and over. "My name is Leonard. I'm 66 years old and I live in Bend, Oregon, where I've spent the last 12 years doing what retired high school teachers do, tending a garden that's too big for one person, building furniture in the garage, and trying to figure out how to exist in a world that suddenly had a lot less light in it. My wife Dorothy passed 3 years ago from a stroke. She was 62. She went fast, which the doctors said was merciful, and which felt like anything but. Our daughter Abigail took it hard. She and her mother had been close in the way that some daughters and mothers are, not just parent and child, but actual friends. When Dorothy died, I watched Abigail go quiet in a way I'd never seen. She started losing weight, stopped returning calls. Then, about 14 months after we lost Dorothy, she met Victor. He came through a grief counseling group she'd been attending at their church. That's what she told me. He'd lost his wife a couple of years prior, he said. He understood loss. He was calm, attentive, said the right things. He was 51 to her 43. Decent looking. Worked in commercial real estate. I didn't like him. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't anything I could point to right away. He was perfectly polite to me, called me Leonard, firm handshake, remembered small details I'd mentioned in passing. But there was something rehearsed about him, like he was playing a version of a good man rather than actually being one. Abigail married him 9 months after they met. Too fast, I thought, but she was lonely, and grief does strange things to a person's sense of time. She has a daughter from her first marriage, my granddaughter Macy, who is 14. Maisie's father, Abigail's ex-husband, lives in Phoenix. He's a decent man. They just weren't right for each other. Maisie splits time between Oregon and Arizona. When she was in Bend, she'd spend most of her free time at my place helping in the garden or watching old movies on the couch. She'd always been perceptive, Maisie. Quiet and watchful in the way some kids are. After Victor came into the picture, Maisie went quiet in a different way. Not the good kind of quiet. I noticed she'd stopped talking about home much. When I asked about her mom, she'd give short answers. She was fine. Everything was fine. Everything. Then the note. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the dark thinking about Clearwater Road. Abigail had inherited Dorothy's old vacation property, a small house outside of town on a couple acres, with a detached shed in the back. Dorothy had used the shed for art supplies, canvases, old frames, reference books. Victor had been talking for months about clearing it out, making it usable space. Abigail had mentioned it a few times, but seemed uneasy about it, like the topic had been raised enough times that it started to feel like pressure. Why would Maisie need me to go there? What was Victor clearing out? Monday morning I drove to Clearwater Road. The house was locked, which I expected. Abigail had given me a spare key years ago before Victor. I wasn't sure it still worked. It did. I walked through the house first. Nothing unusual, just dust and old furniture and the particular silence of a place that used to be full. Then I went out the back. The shed door was padlocked. New padlock. The kind you buy at a hardware store when you don't want people getting in. I have a particular set of skills from 40 years of working with my hands, and I'll say only that I was inside that shed within about 4 minutes. What I found there took my breath away, and not in a good way. The shed had been partially cleared. A lot of Dorothy's art supplies were gone, stacked near the door in trash bags. But pushed to the back wall, behind an old tarp, were 3 archive boxes, the kind with lids labeled in marker. I opened the first one. It was full of financial documents, account statements, investment records, property filings, Abigail's accounts, her mother's estate records, the inheritance Dorothy had left her. I started reading and my hands went cold. There was a document that appeared to be a revised beneficiary designation on Abigail's investment portfolio. Everything redirected to Victor, dated 8 months ago. There was also what appeared to be the early drafting of a new will, Abigail's name at the top, but the structure was wrong. Everything to Victor. Maisie not mentioned at all. My granddaughter, Abigail's only child, completely absent. The signature line was blank, not executed yet, but it was drafted and printed and waiting. The second box was worse. Pill bottles, 4 of them, labels I didn't recognize at first. A notepad with entries written in careful small handwriting, not Abigail's, which I knew well. Victor's, I assumed, dates going back 5 months. Notes beside each date: restless poor sleep, complained of headache, dose at dinner, 11 milligrams. Then 2 weeks later, memory lapse at work meeting, worried, good. Then doctor appointment rescheduled per my request. Told her it was a billing issue. I sat down on the floor of that shed and just breathed for a minute. I photographed everything with my phone. Every page, every label, every entry in that notepad. I Googled the medication names. 2 of them were benzodiazepines, prescription sedatives, the kind that in low doses produce drowsiness and mild confusion, and in prolonged elevated doses can cause significant cognitive impairment, memory problems, and in combination with other substances can be genuinely dangerous. My daughter wasn't falling apart from grief. She was being sedated. The third box was the one that made me feel physically sick. It contained a folder of printed documents about me, my home address, which anyone could find, my property records, public, but also a copy of Dorothy's estate, which had left a portion to me as well as to Abigail, a printout of an old obituary for Dorothy with a handwritten note in the margin that said Leonard, 66, no other children, Abigail sole heir, and underneath that, a sheet of paper with the name of my insurance broker printed at the top, not typed, handwritten, like someone had copied it down from somewhere, and a figure that matched almost exactly the death benefit on my life insurance policy. I put everything back where I found it, closed the tarp, left the shed, drove home. I need to tell you what it feels like to sit in your car in your own driveway and understand that your daughter is being poisoned and you might be next on a list. It's not panic exactly. It's something quieter and much colder. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes just thinking. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Maisie. Did you go? I called her instead of texting back. She answered on the second ring, voice low. Yeah, I went. Did you see the boxes? I saw everything, sweetheart. How long have you known? A long pause. A few months. I saw him putting stuff in Mom's coffee before he gives it to her. Not every time, but sometimes. I thought maybe it was just vitamins or something. But she keeps getting worse and he keeps telling her she's just stressed. He made her cancel 2 doctor appointments. He said they were too expensive with the new insurance. Have you been eating and drinking things he prepares? I don't eat much at home anymore. I say I ate at school. 14 years old, and she'd been navigating this alone, protecting herself. Watching her mother deteriorate and trying to figure out what to do about a man who was twice her size and legally her stepfather. You did the right thing telling me. You did a brave thing. I need you to keep being careful for a few more days. Don't let him know anything's changed. Can you do that? I've been doing it for months, Grandpa. I know you have. I spent that evening calling an old friend named Walt. Not on the list I checked. This is a different Walt. I'm kidding. His name was actually Art Milligan. A man I'd known for 30 years who'd spent his career as a county prosecutor before retiring to teach at a local law school. I laid out everything I had. He listened the way good lawyers listen, without interrupting, filing things away. When I finished, he said, "Leonard, you have the foundation of a solid case, but right now you have photographs of documents that could be explained away individually and circumstantial knowledge about medication. What you need is either direct evidence of tampering or you need to get Abigail tested. Probably both." He gave me the name of a detective, someone he trusted, and said he'd make a call. The next step was the hardest one. I had to get to Abigail. Victor was careful. He didn't isolate her in obvious ways. She still saw friends, still answered her phone. But he was always nearby, always within earshot. She'd mentioned a few times that he liked to be involved in her medical appointments, that he found the healthcare system confusing and liked to help her navigate it. She'd described it as caring. Looking back, it was control. I called Abigail Tuesday morning and told her I'd been having some chest pains. "Nothing serious," I said. "Probably anxiety, but the doctor wanted me to come in and I didn't want to drive myself. Could she come with me?" She was there in 40 minutes. I watched her carefully when she arrived. She moved a little slowly. Her eyes, when she hugged me, took a second to focus. She said she'd been tired. "Just life," she said. "Victor thinks I should see someone about stress." "I'm sure he does." I'd called ahead to a clinic I trusted. Art had recommended a physician there who understood what we were dealing with. While I went through my entirely fictitious checkup, Abigail agreed to have a blood draw too. "Just routine," the doctor suggested. Easier to rule things out. She was too farty to question it much. That told me something on its own. While we were at the clinic, Victor called her phone 3 times. She didn't answer. She was sitting in an exam room with me, and for the first time in a long time, she seemed to relax a little, like a muscle that had been clenched for months. She talked about Dorothy, about missing her, about how hard it had been. She cried a little, quietly, and I held her hand and didn't say anything about what I knew, because she needed to have that moment first. I was going to take it all apart soon enough. I wanted her to have a few minutes of just being my daughter. The blood work came back the next morning. The physician called me directly, as we'd arranged. Elevated levels of lorazepam, a benzodiazepam, in concentrations inconsistent with any current prescription. Abigail held. She hadn't been prescribed anything like it. The doctor flagged it immediately and, with the supporting documentation I'd provided, contacted law enforcement. Detective Rosario, the man Art had connected me with, had been building a file since Tuesday. He took the blood work results, my photographs from the shed, and the financial documents, and on Thursday morning he arrived at Victor's office with a colleague and a warrant. Victor wasn't at his office. He was at Abigail's house. I know this because I was there too, though Victor didn't know that. I'd driven to Abigail's house Wednesday evening under the pretense of bringing groceries. Victor had opened the door himself, pleasant as ever, and I'd smiled back and handed him a paper bag and said it was just some things from my garden. He let me in. Abigail was on the couch, half asleep at 7 in the evening. That night, after Victor went to bed, I placed 2 small cameras, devices Detective Rosario had loaned me, in the kitchen, one behind a row of cookbooks, one in the corner near the coffee station, wireless, motion-activated. I went home. I didn't sleep. At 5:30 Thursday morning, my laptop showed movement in the kitchen. Victor, up early. He went to the cabinet above the range hood, the one that required a step stool, and took down a small bottle. He opened the coffee canister, measured something from the bottle using a small dropper, and stirred it in. Then he put the bottle back, put the stool away, and started the coffee maker. I called Detective Rosario while watching the feed. He was already on his way. By the time Victor brought Abigail her first cup of coffee that morning, there were 2 police vehicles parked outside. He opened the front door to go get the newspaper and found Detective Rosario and 3 officers on the porch. I was parked down the street. I watched the door open and close. Maisie had spent the night at my house. She was asleep in the guest room when I got back. I sat in the kitchen and made coffee, my own coffee, from my own cabinet, and waited for the phone to ring. It rang at 9:47. The detective told me they had Victor in custody. They had the coffee canister. They had the bottle from the cabinet. They had the video footage. They'd also, with the property access Abigail had provided after we called her, gone back to the shed on Clearwater Road and collected all 3 archive boxes as evidence. Abigail was being taken to the hospital. I woke Maisie up, sat on the edge of the bed, and told her it was over. She stared at me for a second, and then she started crying, the kind of crying that's been stored up for a long time, the shaky, gasping kind. I put my arms around her and just let her go. I kept thinking no one would believe me, she said. I kept thinking if I told someone and they didn't believe me, he'd find out, and it would be worse. You were right to be careful, and you were right to tell me. You saved your mom. She cried harder at that. The investigation took a while to unspool fully, and what it revealed was more than I had prepared myself for. Victor's history came apart quickly once people started looking. His previous wife had died of a cardiac event 2 years before he joined that grief support group. She'd been 54 and in good health. The death had been ruled natural, no investigation. After Victor's arrest, her family requested a review. Toxicology from the exhumed samples found evidence of prolonged sedative exposure. He'd done it before. His finances told the rest of the story. He'd inherited significantly from his first wife. He'd spent most of it in 18 months. He'd come to that grief support group with a specific kind of hunger. The forged will had never been signed. Abigail hadn't gotten there yet, or perhaps part of her, through the fog of what he'd been giving her, had resisted. The beneficiary changes on the investment accounts were challenged and reversed. There was a long process with attorneys and financial institutions, exhausting and necessary. Abigail spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors told her that the prolonged lorazepam exposure at the levels Victor had been administering could have caused permanent damage to her memory and cognition if it had continued. She was lucky. She was also devastated. She went to therapy. We all did. Abigail, Maisie, and me. We went separately, and we went together, and it helped in the slow way that honest things help. Victor was charged with attempted murder, elder financial exploitation, because of what he'd been planning with my estate, fraud, and several counts related to the financial tampering. His public defender tried to argue diminished culpability. The judge was not moved. He was sentenced to 22 years without the possibility of parole before serving at least 14. The prosecutor noted at sentencing that there had been another victim. She said it plainly, without drama. 2 families sat in that courtroom who had not had the closure we were about to get. Maisie came to court for the sentencing. She sat between me and her mother, and she held both our hands. She is 15 now. She's applied to a summer pre-law program and gotten in. She talks about becoming a family law attorney. She wants to help kids who don't have a grandparent to tell. She is the bravest person I know. Abigail sold the house she'd shared with Victor. She bought a smaller place about 8 minutes from mine. We have dinner together most Sundays. Abigail cooks. Maisie sets the table. I bring something from the garden when there's anything worth bringing. We talk about Dorothy. We laugh sometimes, and it doesn't feel like a betrayal anymore. I'm 67 now. I think about the men who've told me over the years that they don't like to make waves, don't want to seem paranoid, don't want to be wrong. I understand that instinct. I've had it myself. But there are some situations where the cost of being wrong in one direction is embarrassment, and the cost of being wrong in the other direction is your daughter's life. Those aren't equal risks. If you are reading this and something feels off in your family with someone new who came in and started rearranging things, trust that feeling. You don't have to be certain. You don't have to have proof. You just have to be willing to go look. And if a child in your life is trying to tell you something, in words or in silence or in a note pressed into your hand on the way out the door, please stop and listen. Kids don't have the language for what they see sometimes, but they see it first. They haven't yet learned to explain away the things that make them uneasy. That's not naivety. That's clarity. Maisie knew what she knew. She just needed someone who would believe her. I'm glad I was paying enough attention to be that person. I'm glad I didn't talk myself out of going to that shed. I'm glad I trusted her. I almost didn't. I want to be honest about that, too. Standing in my kitchen the night she gave me that note, I thought about all the ways it could be nothing. Teenage imagination, step-parent resentment, a kid who missed her mom before her mom was even gone. I almost let that thinking win. I keep the note. I have it in the drawer of my workbench in the garage in a small envelope. I take it out sometimes and look at her handwriting, those small, cramped letters trying to take up less space. I think about how long she must have been waiting to write it, how many times she must have thought about it before she finally did. She trusted me when she didn't know for certain that she could. That's the part I carry with me every day. Not the fear of how close we came, though that's there too. It's the weight of being the person a child trusted when she had no one else to go to, and the gratitude that I didn't let her down. Dorothy would have been proud of Maisie. She'd have said so directly, bluntly, the way she always said things. That girl has her grandfather's stubbornness and her grandmother's good sense. She's going to be fine. She is. We all are. And that's what I want to leave you with. If you're watching this from somewhere out there and something in this story landed near something true in your own life, you are allowed to act on what you know. You are allowed to trust the young people around you. You are allowed to protect your family before you have every piece of evidence neatly assembled and labeled. Evil does not announce itself. It shows up with good manners and the right answers and a calm explanation for every concern you raise. The only defense against that is paying attention over time, not to the words, but to the pattern. The pattern never lies. We paid attention, and we are still here, all three of us, on Sunday nights around a table that has real laughter at it again. That's everything. That's the whole thing. I still think about the moment I almost talked myself out of going to that shed. I was standing in my kitchen the night Maisie gave me that note, and I could feel the pull of every reasonable explanation. She's a teenager. She doesn't like her stepfather. She's grieving her grandmother in ways she can't articulate. I'm 66 years old, and I know what it looks like when a kid has a grudge, and maybe this was that. Maybe Victor was just an ordinary man I'd never warmed to, and I was about to make a fool of myself breaking into a shed over a child's suspicion. I went anyway, and I think about what would have happened if I hadn't. Here's what I've come to understand about the way cause and consequence actually work. Not in some abstract philosophical sense, but in the real and practical sense that plays out in a family's life. Victor didn't become dangerous overnight. Every choice he made was a link in a chain. The first time he measured something into Abigail's coffee, the first document he had drafted, the first appointment he quietly canceled on her behalf. Each one made the next one easier. That's how it works, not in a single dramatic moment, but in a slow accumulation of small decisions, each one slightly more than the last. And the same is true in reverse. Every choice I made, to go to the shed, to call Art, to get Abigail to that clinic, to trust Maisie, was also a link in a chain. The outcome we got was not luck. It was a sequence. What I carry from this is that doing right doesn't always feel like doing right when you're in it. The morning I drove to Clearwater Road, I felt foolish and uncertain the entire way there. Moral clarity, in my experience, tends to arrive after the fact. In the moment, it just feels like unease you decide to act on instead of swallow. Maisie understood something was wrong long before she had language for it. She didn't have evidence. She had pattern recognition. The particular intelligence that comes from paying close attention to people over time, from noticing the gap between what someone says and how they move through a room. She was 14 and she had the presence of mind to do something about what she saw rather than dismiss it, even though she was scared, even though she wasn't certain. That kind of clear-eyed thinking under pressure is not given to people. It's built slowly, through the habit of trusting what you observe. And then there's what she did with what she saw. She didn't freeze. She didn't wait for someone to ask. She found a way, a small, risky, handwritten way to act. There's a version of Maisie who was too afraid, who told herself it wasn't her place, who dated one more week and then another. That version of her story ends differently. I don't think courage is the absence of fear. I think it's Maisie pressing that note into my hand, with her own hand shaking, not knowing if I'd believe her, deciding it was worth the risk anyway. She's 15 now, and she's going to be a formidable person. I knew that already, but I know it more now. What I want to leave with anyone who's watching this: if something feels wrong, it probably is. Not always, but enough of the time that it's worth looking. And if a young person in your life is trying to tell you something, in words or in silence or in a folded piece of paper passed quickly before a car pulls away, stop what you're doing and listen like it matters, because it might be the most important thing you hear all year.